Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the 5 worst things about living in Boise, Idaho. We are going to bring it all. I'm going to be as honest as I can with you, so let's go ahead and get into it. What's up guys, I'm Chase Dolan and welcome to the Living in Boise channel, where I try to give you the inside scoop on what it's like to live, work, and play here in the Boise and Greater Treasure Valley area. If this is your first time to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below and make sure to hit that little bell because I release videos like this every single Tuesday and Thursday. And as much as I like making these videos for you and engaging with you all through here, I am a licensed agent here in the Boise area, so I would love even more to help you with your real estate needs. So this number that's going to be popping up below, I'm the one that answers the calls, texts, emails, whatever it is, I am the one there. So if there's any way that I can help, I would absolutely love to. But with that being said, let's get into what you're here for today. The 5 worst things about living in Boise, Idaho. I am someone who absolutely loves living here, but to be honest, there are some things that make this not the perfect place for anyone, but also not the perfect place for potentially you and your family. So let's get into that, because at the end of the day, if somebody ever tells you that something is 100% perfect, guess what? They are lying to you. That is not the case in any portion of your life. But let's get into some of these specific things. So number 1 of the worst things about living here, and this comes from somebody, I relocated here when I came up to school for Boise State University. My first year here, we have things called inversions. So when we kind of move out of the winter into the spring, we have these few weeks where an inversion happens. And think of an inversion as somebody who had never heard about them. They happen up here in the Pacific Northwest. We're in a valley, so everything kind of accumulates in the valley. That is the extent of my weather knowledge. But what an inversion is basically it's an extended period of time where it's kind of gray and gloomy because the clouds have formed a barrier to where the sun's just really not being let through. It is an extended period of time where it just feels kind of cloudy and gloomy, without rain, without anything like that. When I first came up here, they had a record-long inversion, and it was about 2 months. Being from Colorado, where I'm originally from, that is the sunniest place on Earth. On Earth is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you have 330 sunny days down there. So I was definitely in a little bit of shock. It led to me kind of having to get used to it. My energy was feeling low, all of these things. And people talk about the inversions when they first move up here a ton. Inversions are something that you have to get used to. But on the flip side, we do have all 4 seasons. This is kind of the one part of the year where you don't get to feel that, but we have a very distinct winter and summer, as well as a pretty long spring, as well as fall. So once you get through the inversions, you're greeted with spring, and then we get into summer pretty quickly. But that's something I always like to talk about, so it doesn't catch you off guard, because if you are expecting always to have sun, you're gonna be disappointed for a little bit there at the beginning of the year. Again, that 2 months definitely was the longest one I've seen here by far, but on average, I would say expect about a week or 2 of inversions kind of in that early spring time frame. So number 2 on the worst things about living here in Boise is the fact that we just don't have pro sports teams. We aren't going to have an NBA team, an NFL team, NHL, anything like that. And frankly, with our population, we probably won't have that for the foreseeable future. Now, because of this, everybody that moves here, if they're relocating, probably have some sort of allegiance to a sports team, a sports city, something like that. And I can tell you that you will find a community here. I am a big Denver Broncos, Denver Nuggets, Colorado Avalanche guy. Those are my teams. And I know plenty of other fans here, and it's really easy to find, especially if you're looking for kind of the bigger team names, the Seattle, Portland, anything along those lines. But even though we don't have pro sports teams, we do have a ton of great sports here. Boise State University football, basketball, pretty much the entire university sports landscape has the backing of pretty much the entire community, which is an awesome feeling. Tailgating during football season is probably the easiest one to put in front of you that you would probably relate to a pro sports team. But since we don't have those pro sports teams, this entire city, whether they're alums of the university or if they just kind of grew up here, they are behind that team 100%, and it is a really cool thing to witness. Now, if you're into hockey, if you're in more of the semi-pro basketball, we do have some of those teams. So we have the Idaho Stampede, a semi-pro basketball team. We also have the Boise Hawks, semi-pro or kind of a minor league baseball team. And then we also have the Idaho Steelhead, which is a personal favorite of my wife and I's. Idaho Steelheads, they're going to be the second level down kind of a minor league hockey team, and they feed into the Dallas Stars. So we actually get quite a big following here. People absolutely love the Steelheads games. They're right downtown. And that is something, if you're here for the first time, I always recommend going to if you're in your season. Now, number 3 on the worst things about living here in Boise, Idaho is the disparity right now, to be completely honest, between where our housing costs are and then where the average wages are. Over the last few years, we've seen this city grow exponentially. We are growing at an insane rate because people love living here, but our housing cost is what really changed. A lot of the other affordability here in our city has kind of stayed the same. We're still relatively affordable to a lot of our neighboring or competing cities, I would say, but the housing costs have definitely risen, especially if you're looking in Boise proper. So Boise proper, you're going to be looking at a house probably around $500,000. If you're a first-time buyer looking for that entry-level home, I would probably consult my buyers of, hey, if we're going to look in Boise, you have to at least be around that $450,000 mark, and it can get really high really quick here. Some of our surrounding areas have a little bit more affordable housing when we're looking at those entry-level homes, but the housing here has grown much, much quicker than the wage growth, where the average person in Boise, Idaho right now brings home about $60,000. So $60,000 for a $500,000 home, there's a little bit of a gap there. Now, that should come back to earth at some point. I can't tell you when that will be. Our housing has started to kind of take a little bit of a plateau because we were growing way too quick to be sustainable, to be completely honest, but we are still an extremely desirable place for people to live. People love the lifestyle here, and they love when they move here, the way they get sucked into everything that this place has to offer. But with that growth, we're also seeing more and more jobs coming. We're seeing higher paying jobs, bigger companies, and all of that. So if you can find a really good job here, you can really have a great life. But that average wage with that average housing is definitely a disparity here. All right, getting into the next one, number 4 of the worst things about living here in the Boise, Idaho area is the public education system. Now, I'm not saying this to scare you. It is not somewhere that your kids are completely going to learn nothing, but nationally, we aren't always ranked near the top of really any sort of education metric. As of kind of filming this video, what I saw is we kind of were right around 18th worst in the country. So we're in the bottom half. Definitely not the absolute worst, but there's a lot of room for improvement. As somebody who's lived here for a while, though, I want to be honest with you and say education is not always a priority of the people that live here, our government in particular. A lot of funding initiatives for public schools, for universities, all the way down to elementary and pre-K, they, to be honest, always seem to get shot down because people don't want to up their taxes in any way. Now, this can be something that can be completely a pro for some people, but it's something that I like to put out there because public education is definitely not what I would say is the priority here. Now, with all of that being said, there are some really good schools here. There's some great charter schools if you want to kind of bypass the public education as you are able. But there are also some good schools here in the public realm. You just have to be ready to look for that. And then also what I like to say is be ready to supplement your child's education. If you want them to learn something, if you want them to excel at a certain rate, be ready to have some extra work at home, have some extra tutoring, something like that. I would say if you're just going to leave it to the public school system, a lot of people do get disappointed, but we also have a really good graduation rate of people going on to college. We've seen that rise in the last few years. And as growth continues to come, this will continue to change because people who are moving here tend to always be surprised that our public education system is lacking in the areas that it is. So it's just something that I like to put out there, but I end every talk about schools with this one: do your own research. What makes a school really good to me could be very different for you and the next person and the next person. School ratings aren't always the best way to find out if it's the right place for you and your child. So do your own research, figure out what works best for you, and there are some schools that people are extremely happy with. And number 5, the final thing that we're going to talk about of the worst things about living in Boise, Idaho, is the lack of diversity. Boise as a whole, and Idaho, I would say, on the grand whole, is definitely resistant to change. There is not a ton of diversity of thought. We are when we look at the stats, we are over 93% white. We don't have a ton of differing thoughts and beliefs here in our state. This is going to change with growth as people move in here, as they relocate for jobs, etc. But something that I would say is pretty true, and I think most people would argue the same thing, is Idaho as a whole, when you're looking at all of the different states around the country, is one of the last to try new things. They don't like to change things. They definitely like to operate with kind of one mind. We're all on the same page, and I'll give them credit. There's a lot of things about Idaho and Boise in particular that we don't want to have change because that's what makes it so great. But that is something that when I first moved up here, it took me a little bit to get used to. And so if that's something that you're looking at, there's other ways to kind of supplement that diversity, but it's not something that you're just going to have kind of as a default as you would in other places. So something to be aware of. Now, if you're thinking about all of these things that don't make Idaho the perfect place and you have specific questions, drop me a comment below, or again, this phone number. I'm the one that answers the calls, texts, and emails. Again, reach out if you have any questions, comment below. I would love to hear your all's thoughts because I know I'm not the only one that thinks these, but I'm also probably talking about things that other people see as a positive. I would love to hear that. So if you can, drop a comment below, but until the next one, hope you all enjoy.